All right, if you have a goal of getting toned, then this is the video for you. So, getting toned isn't a thing, all right? So, we're gonna jump right into it. Getting toned is probably like a phrase, a gimmicky phrase that the fitness industry started as a way to get women interested in fitness, back in the day in like the bodybuilding years, right? And that term tone sounded really appealing because there was this big fear that if you were to do strength training the same way that men do, you're going to look big and bulky, which is extremely hard to achieve. Most people could never achieve that physique, especially at the level that you would be doing anyway, right? So there's an extreme amount of being dialed in and commitment for years to achieve like an Arnold Schwarzenegger bodybuilder physique. Okay, so that's not going to happen. Now, when we think about getting toned, all you're really doing is building muscle because you can't tone or show tone if you don't have any muscle to show, right? So depending on where you're at currently with, your body fat percentage and your exercise journey, there could be a phase where you want to do what we would call a fat loss phase first and then start to build muscle, but you can also build muscle while losing weight too. So generally speaking, these are the principles that you would want to have in your exercise program to achieve goals of building muscle and getting stronger. Because while building muscle is great, purely from a vanity perspective, you could work towards that goal and not get stronger, but we could do both, right? So let's do both. We're going to build strength and muscle, and this is the best way that I program it for my clients. Okay, so when I give an online program to somebody, this is what it looks like. So for the repetitions, that's how many times let's use a bicep curl, for example. How many bicep curls in a row am I going to be doing? So usually, more often than not, the repetition range that I give for hypertrophy, which is the fancy term for building muscle, and strength is 8 to 12 repetitions. And I give a range because usually you're going to choose a weight that feels challenging but manageable with good technique for 8 repetitions. You're going to perform 8 repetitions for the designated amount of sets. And then from there, week over week, you're going to try to increase reps. So then you're going to shoot for 10 reps, 12 reps. When you max out the repetition range, that's when you would drop the repetitions back down to the beginning, 8, and then we would add more weight. Okay, so that's a good repetition range. So anything over that is really going to focus more on just building muscle. If we go past 30 repetitions, you're really focusing on just aerobic at that point. So like more cardio feel or muscular endurance. There's not going to be any benefit if it's not challenging enough weight-wise to actually stimulate muscle growth. And if we go lower than 8 repetitions, you're going to be focusing pretty much purely on strength. Okay. And I know that seems weird that you can get stronger without building muscle, but you can. Okay. You can get stronger without increasing your muscle size. So this 8 to 12 rep range is a really sweet spot. So how many sets should you do? So typically I program in 3 sets, but 2 to 4 sets is great, right? So you want to make sure that those are the appropriate intensity. Okay, so do not count warm-up sets where things are feeling easier. We want to make sure you hit the appropriate intensity level for all of your working sets. So this is in terms of how many working sets should you be doing at the level of intensity that we want. 2 to 4, okay? And I like the 3 because sometimes that first set, you're kind of getting your sea legs under you per se with the weight you're using. And then sets 2 and 3 feel really good. And then sometimes we can add that 4th set. For intensity, now this is really important, probably the most important piece. And I'm going to go over this a little bit more in depth on the next slide. So we want the intensity level to feel challenging. If you have been using the same weights at home for years, there's something wrong there. Okay, so while I'm the first to say any physical activity and exercise is better than nothing, but if you are strength training for a purpose of improving your strength and your muscle size, you need to be doing something that's called progressive overload. And all that means is progressively and intentionally challenging your muscles in a systematic way over time. So that way your muscles are never at this stagnant state. So if you've been using 5-pound dumbbells and doing all of your exercises with 5-pound dumbbells for years, we have to change that. Okay. So there should be points where you are too strong for the weights you have and we need to get more weights at home, or you're at a gym and you need to be continuously grabbing the heavier weights at the gym when you start to max out the repetition range. All right. So 2 to 3 reps in reserve, or I like to use the term reps in the tank. So what that means, and I'll go deeper in this on the next slide, but you're reaching the point at the end of each working set where you only have 2 or 3 reps left in you that you could perform with good technique before your technique would break down and you would reach failure. Okay. And by failure, we mean you just cannot perform the exercise. All right. So for example, if I was doing, I had bicep curls in my program and I was doing 8 to 12 reps and I had a, 15-pound dumbbell and I got to 9 repetitions, but I felt like, okay, I think maybe I have 2 reps left in the tank. I would probably stop at 9 repetitions. But if I got to, 12 repetitions with that weight, and I felt like I had, 4, 5 reps in the tank, I would bring the repetitions back down to 8 and add more weight to it. So I'd go heavier, maybe grab 20-pound dumbbells, do the bicep curls with that, and use that reps in reserve intensity gauge to see how many reps I could do. So I would probably start with 8 again. So the more, this probably sounds more confusing than it is, but it's really using like auto regulation, so your body to tell you how hard to push, and it just takes some learning of that and what it feels like to push really close to failure. So for the rest times, when you're performing strength training at the appropriate intensity level, the rest periods are just as important as the working sets. Because when we're doing this type of exercise, it's an anaerobic activity for your muscles. So you need more recovery time for your muscles to be able to perform again at the same intensity level. So typically, I would say 60 seconds to 2 minutes. If you were performing strictly strength exercises and lifting super heavy, let's say 6 reps or less, you might even do 2 to 5 minute rest times in between. But we don't want to cut those rest times short. There are ways that we can make those rest times feel more productive by supersetting exercises. So for example, we could do a squat and a core exercise, like a plank in that rest period, to take some of that rest time and be more productive with it, which is typically what I do. I'll program in supersets for people. But we don't always do that. So for some of my programs for myself, I will do maybe 8 squats and then I will take a 2-minute break and I'll just rest, right? Maybe do some mobility in between. So that's the rest period, super important, but pretty straightforward. So you would just want to follow the rest times programmed in. And then frequency. So you want to work for optimal results, each muscle group twice per week at least. And you want to keep the same program for at least 4 weeks minimum. So literally the same exact workouts every single week for at least 4 weeks. So if I had programmed in for an online client an upper body, lower body, full body day, so that's 3 different workout days, they are going to do those same exact workouts week over week over week with no changes other than increasing their reps and increasing their weight over time, maybe decreasing the rest time a little bit within these ranges, okay? So that is one of the most key things, in addition to intensity, keeping the same workouts. So if you're dabbling in lots of different workout videos and you're choosing a new one every single day, every single week, you want to keep the same videos that you are doing every single week for at least 4 weeks, trying to build on them progressively, overloading your weight or your repetitions, okay? So that is super important. If you are going to the gym, you don't want to just do whatever you feel like doing that day. You want to follow a program of exercises week over week over week, the same program. And especially if you're a group class person too, a lot of times the classes change very frequently just because of engagement and excitement. So typically group, and I'm a group exercise class instructor and I love group fitness classes, but that's not the place typically to see progress with building muscle and strength, unless it is a specifically programmed class that it looks just like this format. Okay, so I do have a small group that I work with here in my studio, and we do this exact format, but that's not what I do in my group fitness classes in the local community. We just get together, have fun, get some movement in, but that's not where you're going to see these really strategic results, right? You just feel stronger and healthier and feel like you're in a community and get your heart rate up a bit. So that kind of hits a different bucket of exercise, not necessarily strength training. So last thing I want to go over are the reps in reserve method, okay? So when you are lifting, you are paying attention to how the exercise feels. So first, I want you to know what muscle group you are working. So if you're doing we're going to keep the bicep curl exercise example. If you're working your bicep curl, you know you're going to be working, get you in the mirror here, working your bicep, right? If you were doing a glute bridge, you want to be knowing that you're working your glutes so you can bring your brain and your muscle together for that awareness. Okay, so we want to have that awareness to think, okay, when I'm doing a bicep curl, I want to squeeze my bicep on the way up and slowly relax it on the way down. Okay, so we want to pay attention to how that feels within each working set. So when you get to a point where you feel like you have maybe 1, 2, or 3 reps left in reserve or left in the tank, that's when you want to stop. Okay, so typically that's where I coach on. This is the RPE scale, rate of perceived exertion scale. That's what I have a lot of my clients use to gauge their intensity level. So this is a 1 to 10 scale. So scale 10 would be you cannot perform any more repetitions. You went to absolute failure with an exercise. So you were doing calf raises and you went and you did so many calf raises that your calves couldn't move anymore, right? So that's a feeling of going to failure with an exercise. So if we work backwards from that, a 9 out of 10 intensity, you could do 1 more repetition at the end of a given set and no more. An 8 out of a 10 intensity, you could do 1 to 2 more repetitions at the end of a given set, and then an RPE of a 7, 2 to 3 more repetitions at the end of a given set. I usually have most clients in an RPE of a 7. Some of my more advanced clients are an RPE of an 8, okay? So this is typically where I have people working. If you are at an RPE of like 6 or lower, you probably are not challenging your muscles enough to see change, okay? So that is the key. We want to challenge your muscles just enough to stimulate change, but not too much, where we need so much recovery time that you cannot consistently get your workouts in. Hopefully this was helpful in that if you have any questions, you feel comfortable reaching out to me to get more information, but all of this is super important if you want to see results, okay? Okay, have a great rest of your day.